We open up the phone lines, 877-996-6369. I have put up a poll question. All of you can vote in it, obviously. Go to my Twitter feed, @ClayTravis. Should Montrezl Harrell have been fined and or suspended by the NBA for calling Luka a, quote, bitch-ass white boy? And so here's the way to think about this from my perspective. People get mad at me sometimes for my opinions, but the way I think about the show and certainly the opinions that I share is I try to build every opinion I have on prior precedents, right? So whatever precedent is being set, I'm going to follow it going forward. And let me give you an example. We talked about Deshaun Jackson's homophobic comments. Sorry, not homophobic, anti-Semitic comments. I'm talking about Kobe. I'll get back to Kobe in a sec. We talked about Deshaun Jackson's anti-Semitic comments on this show. And then when Marty Brenneman came, was it Marty Brenneman or Joe? What's the guy's name? Tom Brenneman, yeah. When Tom Brenneman came out and had a gay slur that he uttered on the air, I said that their suspension should be similar and or their treatment should be similar, and I didn't think both should lose their job because I'm opposed to the idea of cancel culture in general, but that the precedent should be the same. So Kobe got fined $100,000. It's been 9 years now. I can't believe it's been 9 years since that happened. Kobe got fined $100,000 for an anti-gay slur that was directed at an official. And that was kind of the NBA setting the precedent that your on-court statements could be used against you if they were considered to be of a hateful nature. When I saw Montrezl Harrell call Luka Doncic a bitch-ass white boy, to me that was a race-based insult on the basketball court. And let me explain what I mean by that. The obviously, I think everybody out there would be like, yeah, bitch ass is an insult. I don't think anybody else out there is like, oh, I did like that was an intended insult. The fact that he called him a bitch ass white boy, to me, all four of those words are intended as an insult. Bitch and ass, which I don't think anybody would argue with. Boy, which is, I mean, Luka, whether you love him or hate him, is a man. So when you're calling someone a boy, you are referring to them in a, emasculated, childlike fashion. And also his race was, to me, intended as part of the insult. Bitch-ass white boy is four words that Montrezl Harrell is intending to be an insult. And if you change the race to other race or ethnicities, I think most of you would also hear that as an insult. Now, the easy one to do is if Luka had called Montrezl Harrell a bitch-ass black boy, he probably would get suspended for the rest of the NBA playoffs. And he would be the number one story in all of sports, and everybody would be calling him racist. So if Luka says to Montrezl Harrell what Montrezl Harrell said to him, it's the number one story in sports. The NBA probably suspends him for the rest of the playoffs. They might also suspend him for games to start next season, and Luka is the number one story in all of sports, and everybody's like, oh, Luka Doncic is a huge racist. All right? So that's the black-white angle. I don't even think you can hardly make any arguments otherwise. Let's take it outside of black and white. If one of these guys on the basketball court says to another, you are a bitch-ass Mexican boy, I think most people see Mexican as an insult in that context. If someone says, you are a bitch-ass Chinese boy, I think most people would see Chinese as an insult in the context of that statement. In other words, if Jeremy Lin had been called a bitch-ass Chinese boy, I think most people would see the reference to his at that point his country of origin as an insult, right? If Yao Ming had been called a bitch-ass Chinese boy, I think most people would see the Chinese reference as in being included as a part of the insult. And if the NBA, so that's my analysis. I'm going to bring in the crew, see what they think. And also, I want to have the Outkick jury. Every now and then we bring in the Outkick jury. I'm going to open up the phone lines here and take your calls here momentarily. 877-996-6369. All right. So do you see that as a race-based insult? I do. I think the white in the bitch-ass white boy insult was intended as an insult, race-based insult. If we are going to argue of all times right now, when the NBA literally has players with equality on the back of their jerseys, and when LeBron James loves to run around with equality sneakers, right now Montrezl Harrell apologized. Would Luka have been able to walk up to Montrezl Harrell and apologize and the story just disappear? I think all of you know the answer is no. And so if the NBA truly wants to be an equal league, shouldn't the punishment for Montrezl Harrell be the exact same as the punishment would have been for Luka Doncic? I think the answer is yes, and I don't believe that there's any way to argue that that punishment has been equal. Luka would have been far more punished for saying the exact same thing about Montrez than Montrez was. Now, Luka got his revenge. To his credit, this is the way I wish situations like this were handled. But is this the precedent that the NBA has set? Do you believe, Danny G, that this was intended to be a racial insult by Montrezl Harrell? And do you think there should have been a fine or suspension based on the trash talk precedent that the NBA set with Kobe Bryant?
Man, this was such a huge argument over the weekend, and I was reading both sides going back and forth.
By the way, I think this is the only place that will actually have this argument. I think you're right that it was a big discussion online. I haven't seen anybody write it, right? I haven't seen anybody other than, to his credit, Gary Sheffield Jr., one of our writers, wrote on Saturday.
Yeah, I read his column. That was a good one.
He wrote a column Saturday morning saying that if the NBA cares about equality, they need to suspend Montrezl Harrell based on what he said. This happened Friday night, right? This happened Friday night in the NBA, and I thought his column was a strong one. He's the only person I saw. You may have seen somebody with an audience, like on a site. I didn't see any other columnist write that opinion that if the NBA cares about equality, they would suspend there. So what do you think? How would you contextualize this situation?
Well, where it's a little bit tricky, and your boy Doug Gottlieb made a little video. I don't know if you saw that on Twitter.
No, I didn't see it.
And he obviously played basketball at a pretty high level, and he said he heard things like this all throughout his life on the basketball court. Because obviously, if you're not black and you play professional basketball, you're the minority, so you're going to hear these kind of things. And Doug's point was, you just got to have thick skin and brush it off.
I understand that argument completely, but the argument is actually interesting because what we have is a minority on the basketball court in the NBA for sure, right? While he may not be a minority in the country, Luka is a minority on the basketball court. So what you have is a majority culture that is denigrating another culture within the context of the basketball court. I understand Doug's perspective.
I do too.
Luka can't curl up in the fetal position and cry, and he's going to look soft if he complains about what somebody is saying to him. I'm not talking about the way that Luka should respond. I think Luka responded perfectly by basically making Montrezl Harrell his bitch. Let's be honest. If anybody is the bitch in the Montrezl Harrell-Luka Doncic relationship, it is Montrezl Harrell, and Luka made sure that everybody saw it prison style on the basketball court, all right? So that's Luka's response is the appropriate one. I understand Doug's perspective. I'm talking about the league's response. Well, Adam Silver is trying to argue we are a SJW league. We are a social justice warrior league. They've already set the precedent with Kobe Bryant that if you trash talk on the league, in a league event in an inappropriate way the league determines, we will at least fine you. And so I understand the argument of Luka shouldn't ask for help. I agree with that. What I'm saying is, if you're Adam Silver, what is the appropriate response here in light of the NBA claiming to be an equality-laden league?
Yeah, no doubt the NBA
I think at a minimum you have to fine him.
I do too, because they put themselves into this position with their stance on social issues in our country. We know besides our country, they're not really outspoken, obviously, with everything.
Yeah, they don't care about China at all. This is just another example of hypocrisy.
The focus, though, on the internet argument over the weekend was it a slur? Because the part that would bother me if I'm Luka was bitch ass more than being called white boy. Now, if he had said cracker or something like that, then that's a quote unquote
I think
slur.
but I think there's zero doubt the way you read it that all of that is intended to be an insult. Right? If he had said bitch ass, MFer, right? Then I would be like, okay, whether you agree or disagree with it, he's not particularly referencing the race.
Right.
When you reference someone's race as a part of an insult, to me, it's a racial insult. If just take it outside of black-white. If somebody says bitch ass Chinese boy to Yao Ming or to Jeremy Lin, then to me, that's clearly an insult based on them being Chinese. And I know it's a little bit different. You could say bitch-ass Asian boy would be the same thing, or bitch-ass Hispanic boy, but I think it's more likely in a basketball context that he would be called Chinese, and I think it's more likely, and I'm curious what Roberto thinks, that you would be called a bitch-ass Mexican boy in a context like that as opposed to a bitch-ass Hispanic boy, right? So to me, I don't think there's any doubt that this was a race-based insult, because otherwise, he could just call him a bitch-ass, MFer. I've got to be careful not to curse here. And I think people would be like, okay, that sounds like normal trash talk. And remember, by the way, how angry LeBron got when Draymond Green called him a bitch. Do you guys remember that? That was arguably the impetus behind the decision, partly to give LeBron the fuel to come back from that 3-1 deficit. If I'm not mistaken, Draymond Green called LeBron a bitch in that game where they went up 3-1, and then Draymond got suspended, right? Now, did he get suspended for calling LeBron a bitch, or was it calling him a bitch and also wasn't there a foul-related incident?
I think so. I'm looking it up right now for you.
All right. Let's continue this conversation. Again, we'll load up the phone lines. I will go to you on the Outkick jury, 877-996-6369. If you don't have time to call in, you can go vote in our poll question, and there are a lot of you rolling in to vote in the poll question. Almost 4,000 of you have voted in the first 15 minutes. 75% of you in the poll are saying Montrezl Harrell should have been fined and or suspended by the NBA for calling Luka a bitch-ass white boy. And 75%.
Clay, really quick, Draymond Green not only called him a bitch, he hit him in the groin after LeBron stepped over him.
And he got a one-game suspension, right? He missed Game 5?
Correct.
But remember how much of a story it was for Draymond to call LeBron a bitch. That blew up into a huge story. This insult is worse than that one.